Bienvenidos, Ushamdid, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the CTS-233 Fall 2021 semester. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DevNet Associate or DevASC course curriculum. And in this supplemental video tutorial, we're going to again turn our focus to the Linux command line. And in this video, our focus is going to be on the pwd command and the cd command. In other words, the print working directory command and the change directory command. And more than that, we're going to be diving into the file system, how it's hierarchical in nature, what that means and what that looks like. And we're going to be addressing the use of the dot and the dot that you see in every Linux directory, including the top of the file system hierarchy, the root directory. So let's go ahead and dive into the CLI. And here you can see I'm logged in. Now, when a user logs in, that user is placed into a directory, and that directory is known as their home directory. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, shorthand for the home directory is, I like to call it the squiggly, but technically you could call it the tilde. But the tilde is shorthand to represent your current working directory. Now, also from the previous video, remember that we have the ls command to list the contents of the directory. And you can see here, based on the color scheme, and if you're following along on a Mac, you might not see the same behavior. Again, this is an Ubuntu virtual machine running in VMware Fusion on my iMac. And so one of the nice things is that for directories, the color of the name of the directory when you run the ls command is changed to this light blue. Now, what other option could I add here to definitively prove that those are actually directories? And if you were thinking from yesterday, well, what about a long listing? You talked about the first leftmost bit. And in fact, remember we said that if you have a D here, that indicates that we have a directory, followed by the 9 permission bits, again, for the owner, the group, and the world, or everybody else who's not the owner and not in the group. But this conclusively proves that when we see these blue names listed in the output of ls on the Ubuntu virtual machine, that indicates that that is a directory. Now, how do you know where you're at in the file system? And this is one of the things from a networking perspective where sometimes it's nice to kind of know where in the configuration hierarchy you might be, right? Am I under gig 01? Am I under serial 000? What interface configuration stanza am I underneath and operating on? And so it's nice here that with Linux, you can simply say pwd, print working directory. And this is going to show you the absolute path name to the directory in which you reside. And so that term, absolute path name, is something we're going to be talking about, and we're going to compare and contrast that to another term called the relative path name. So you've got two ways that you can refer to your current position in the Linux file system, one being the absolute path name, meaning we're starting from the absolute top of the file system hierarchy, taking us all the way down to where we are, or the relative path name, which we can represent. Again, you see the tilde is kind of shorthand, but the current working directory, right, is where we currently are. And that is represented by the dot. Remember that single dot? If I said ls-la, this is what represents the current working directory, because what do you notice here when I say ls or even ls-a? There is no listing for Travis P. Bonfili, which is the directory that I'm in. And the output we're looking at is, and I should actually even trim it down here, to these file names. You'll notice when I say ls-a list the contents, it doesn't list the name of the current working directory. It's represented by the single dot. So pwd will print the current working directory. Again, if you say man pwd, you can see that we've got all kinds of, well, very limited number of options, to be honest. And one that might help is you can also say pwd help. So we use that sort of long GNU style option. And it gives us the information, some help information similar to the man page. But again, very limited information here with pwd. Now, the default status for pwd behaves as if -L had been supplied. And typically, you're just typing pwd. Now, one of the nice things about Linux and the bash shell is that you can actually have your current working directory so that you don't always have to type pwd to see where you're at. You can have it displayed as part of your prompt. So instead of having to type pwd, I just sort of look over here and see, oh, there's the tilde. I'm in my home directory. So you know where that is. But if you wanted to see, maybe you forgot it was /home/Travis, maybe you forgot the absolute path name, you could say pwd. So now let's turn our focus to changing directories, right? Because up until this point, everything we've been doing has been focused on our, and I say print working directory as a way to remember pwd. You could also think of it as your present working directory or your current working directory, because when you type pwd, that tells you the directory you are currently in. That won't always be your home directory, because the cd command to change directory, again, another built-in command. It's built into the Linux operating system. cd allows me to move to different directories. And so then that raises a question, well, how do I know what all of these different directories are? Well, this is where we need to talk about the Linux file system. And so the Linux file system, and the analogy that I like to use, is that it's like a pyramid. And let's change our color to red here. I think red's going to show good. Yeah, so I like to think of it like a pyramid, right? And at the top of this pyramid is the top of the file system hierarchy, which is where we have the / or it's commonly referred to as the root directory. So the root directory is the top of the Linux file system hierarchy, and everything else springs from the root or is below the root. So again, this is the top of the file system hierarchy. So one way, and this is great practice, is that we can sort of move around using that cd command. So let's cd to the / the root directory. Now, we know how to use the ls command, and we know that file names that are listed, and remember, directories in Linux are seen and treated as if they were files. It's just that they don't contain text like a text file would. They contain other files, other directories. But when we look at this, we can see that, okay, CD-ROM is a directory, boot is a directory. We've got all these different directories here. And the other way is that ls-l. And take a look. And now we see the first bit of an L, meaning it is a link, right? And we'll talk about the difference between symbolic links and hard links in a little bit. But the takeaway here is you can quickly see what some of these different directories are. And so temp is a directory that we're going to be interested in for our purposes in this video, because temp is considered sort of like a sandbox or a playground. Maybe if you wanted to run in there, change into the temp directory. And what I just did right there is I'm using the relative path name. And so we'll talk about that in just a second as well. So I can move into the temp directory and let's see what's in here. And as you can see, there's just kind of a conglomeration of a whole bunch of weird looking files and file names. But this is somewhere where you could come into and maybe, create some files to try to practice some things. Typically, you would not do that on a production system. But again, if it's your own little virtual machine, this is a great scratch area because when you reload the Linux system or reboot the Linux system, the temp directory gets wiped out. Everything in it is gone. And then when the system comes back up, you're kind of starting from scratch again. So if it's something you want to keep, you'd want to do that in your home directory where things are not wiped out when the box is reloaded. So we talked about the top of the file system hierarchy being that root directory, and then sort of everything else stemming from the root. And so you saw that under root, I think there was, what do we have? We have sys. We'll take what we can see right here. And I won't put it in alphabetical order, but then you've got user, right? And these are other directories. You've got var, right? And these directories all contain things that are related to the Linux file system and the operation of the Linux operating system. And then we've got temp. And again, temp is just kind of like the name implies, it's just temporary space because when the box is reloaded, that space is going to get wiped out. So when we refer to locations in the file system, and this is important, when we're on the CLI, and we're making references to where we would like to move, or maybe files we would like to open, or directories in which we would like to list out the contents. There's two ways that we can refer to where in the file system these elements reside. And the first is using the absolute path name, and I'll just say AB. And the absolute path name, and there's two very simple rules here. The absolute path name will always, always, always begin with a /. So when you saw /home, /Travis P. Bonfili, and I'll just put, TPB here. We're not going to spell it all out. This is referring to my home directory using an absolute path name because it absolutely starts at the absolute top of the file system hierarchy, the root directory. So if something is listed out and it starts with a /, not a dot and a /, but a / by itself, this is the absolute reference to that home directory, right? Or that directory TPB, right? Which is a home directory. Now, the other way that we can refer to elements, files, and directories is by relative, a relative path name, right? So you've got the absolute path name and then you have the relative path name. And the relative path name is the path name that you could use relative to where you currently are in the file system. So this is a great example of the use of the cd command and a relative path name. Because where are we currently at in the file system? We're already here at the root directory. We're at the top of the file system. That's where we currently reside. So do I have to say cd /temp? I don't, because that would be redundant. We're already in the /, and I say / root directory. And I'm saying / because I'm trying to drive home this absolute path name versus the relative path name. So that would be just cd temp, not with the /, that would be relative path name, right? Now, the dot, which represents the current working directory, and the dot, which represent the parent directory, these are conventions that are used when you are using relative path names, not absolute path names. And I'm going to show you some examples of what this looks like right now. So let me clear the screen here. And again, the rule is very simple. If it doesn't begin with the /, the root directory, it is a relative path name. Only when it begins with the / is it the absolute path name. So if I wanted to list things out in the temp directory, I could say ls. Now I could also say ls dot, but again, you don't need to put the dot there because by default, ls lists out the contents of your current working directory. And I say pwd, and you'll notice it shows us the same thing that's in our prompt. So how do I get, or how can I get back into my home directory? Now, I'm going to skip over a shortcut here in order to sort of drive home this point. Well, I could say cd and use the absolute path name beginning with the /. So cd/home/Travis P. Bonfili, and hit enter. And you can see the tilde has been substituted in the path name, or for the path name in my prompt, because I'm now in my home directory. So if I say pwd, it shows you where I'm at. Now, how could I get back to the temp directory? Well, there's two ways I can do that. I could say cd/temp and use the absolute path name. And now let me show you a shortcut if you get lost and you don't know where you're at in the file system, and all you're hoping to do is, I just need to get back to my home directory. If you type cd with no arguments by itself, that automatically puts you back in your home directory, irrespective of where you are in the file system. And so that means you could be anywhere in the file system, including your home directory, and cd will put you in your home directory. Right now, we're already in the home directory, but I wanted to show you that if you run it in the home directory, you still stay in the home directory, because the function of the change directory built-in shell command is to take you from wherever you are and to put you back into your home directory. So I said cd/temp, and that's one way to get to the temp directory using the absolute path name. But what if I said cd space ... and hit enter? Look where that moves me. So it moves me one directory up. Remember, we said that the two dots, which is a relative path name convention, moves me up one directory. If I wanted to use the absolute path name convention, I would have said cd/home. And you can see we end up with the same result. However, my choice to use the two periods is probably a little more efficient than saying /home. So let's get back into my main home directory and then say cd ... That moves me into the home directory. What if I say that again? cd ... What directory would we end up in here? Yeah, we end up in the root directory. And then I could use another absolute path name to get back into temp. And that's one way to do it, but that is not how you would do it, because we can combine these relative path name features that we're using by saying cd, and again, where am I at? I'm in /home/Travis Bonfili. So if I say cd space ... that puts me where? That puts me in the home directory, and we saw that above. And then I can put the directory or file name separator, which is that /. Now here, that is not representative of the root directory. Remember, that is representative of the root directory if and only if it is the first thing that follows the CD command. If I've got other things before the forward slash, then we're not using it to represent the root directory. So when I say cd space ... if I was to hit enter, it would put us into the home directory, right? Now, back into the slash home directory. So now back into Travis P. Bonfili, I can build on this, right? Because again, we saw that puts me in home too. But here, if I use the forward slash, what I'm trying to say is I've got something else, right? I've got another file name or directory name that I want to use here. And I'm going to use ... because the first ... puts me into the home directory. The second ... puts me into the root directory. And let's prove that by doing that. Again, so this is moving me up. When you're using the two dots, the ... it's continually moving you up one directory for each ... that you use. And hopefully you see that here. And it put me into the root directory. So now let's move back to my home directory, Travis P. Bonfili. And we can see that if I say pwd. So now if I say cd space ... temp, is this going to work? And so again, we're in my home directory, which is /home/Travis P. Bonfili. And remember, that slash is a file name separator. This one here is representative of the root directory and serving as a separator, right? Because in the root directory, there's a directory called home. So I'm going to change directories from the home directory up one directory here. So this command would put me in home. But we continue along with our command. And then we go up one directory from home, which puts us in the root directory. And then we go down a directory into the temp directory, which is in root. So we end up in /tmp. And we end up in the temp directory. Now, we can argue, and again, I'm doing this for demonstrative purposes because if you're watching this, you're probably saying, well, that makes no sense. Why not just say cd/temp? And you could do that. Again, I'm demonstrating the use of the ... And now I'm going to give you an even better example of the ... So this was using the temp directory. And again, if we get lost, just type cd by itself, hit enter. Boom, you're back in your home directory. So let's list out some of the things we had here. Well, we had this DevNet directory that we were in yesterday. And we created some things here. And we also created some files and directories under the DevNet directory. So you'll notice that it still abbreviates /home/Travis P. Bonfili with the tilde using this, and then a /, the directory, and then another /, a file name separator, and then the directory that I'm currently in. So if I said pwd, that's the absolute path name. So let me ask you this. If we had a file in my home directory that I wanted to copy into this directory, and I'm in this directory, dir, how would we do that? And we're going to introduce the cp command, which stands for copy. But more importantly, how do I reference those file names? Do I use the absolute path name? Do I use the relative path name? How about, can I use the tilde? Would that work? And so let's take a look at some different ways that we could do that. And first thing we're going to do is let's just put a file in here. Let's look at, we don't have any regular text files here. So let's go ahead and create one. And I'll just say touch new file. And so that's going to be the new file. Let's put some stuff in it here. We'll say a cat etc hosts, and we'll append the output of etc host, the etc host file, into new file. And there we go. So let's get back into DevNet, and let's get back into ADIR, right? So here we are. That's the absolute path name of where I currently reside in the Linux file system hierarchy. Now, we know that there's this file, new file, in my home directory. So how can I copy that file and get a copy of it into this directory? Well, I could use the copy command, but now I've got to refer to the file name. How do we do that? Well, could I say ... and that puts me in the DevNet directory, / ... that puts me into my home directory, new file, and I want to put it in this directory, my current working directory. And what cool little abbreviation do we have that represents the directory in which we currently reside? The dot. So this command right here, and again, this is not the optimal way to do this. We're going to get there. But this is a great example of how you can use the ... to move myself up into the directory I want to be in, which is my home directory. Then I give the name of the file in that home directory, and I say put it here, ... put it right here. So I hit enter, we type ls, and there's new file. If you want to remove a file, you can use the rm command. So we'll say rm new file. Now when I type ls, we have no files. But this sets us up for another example. So how can I copy that file again? Well, we already looked at sort of the relative path name that we could use to get there using the ... and the ... I could also use the absolute path name, Travis P. Bonfili, FIGLI / new file, and then ... right? Or I could literally, and you'll see why the ... and the ... become very, very convenient. Because think of it like this. If you could just simply type ... to represent /home / Travis P. Bonfili / devnet / adir, right? So literally that ... which represents the directory I'm currently in, is representing all of that. Home, Travis P. Bonfili, DevNet, and let's see that that works. And we'll type ls, and there's new file. Again, you want to optimize the way that you're running your commands, right? And try to come up with a more beautiful solution for the command. And so here was an example of using absolute path names for both the source file and the location of where we wanted that file to go. So now let's look at maybe a little bit more elegant solution. So, and let's remove new file, right? Just, excuse me, so that we have no files here. So let's be tricky. What if I said copy tilde / new file, right? Because I have to separate the file name from the directory name. And that's what that / is doing for us there. So this is pretty cool, right? Because remember, if the tilde represents /home / Travis P. Bonfili, I mean, why type out /home / Travis P. Bonfili or have to sit and think, okay, well, if I type ... I go from adir to devnet, and then if I type ... again, I go from devnet into the home directory, then I can get the file name. We know it's in the home directory. Use the tilde. Separate the directory name from the file name with the /, and then say ... And does that do what we thought it was going to do? It does, and there it is. There's the file, ls-l. Let's do a long listing. And so that is how you can take advantage of the ... and the ... in the file system hierarchy. Now, this would be considered sort of a kind example because the file is conveniently located in my home directory. You typically don't have a bazillion files. If you're organized, you typically don't have a bazillion files in your home directory, text files and a bunch of Python source code files or text files, whatever the case may be. You typically have a bunch of directories in which you're going to keep those files. And so let's take a look at an example of using relative path names with these little sort of tricky conventions with the tilde and the ... or the ... and the ... how that might become very, very time-saving when we're copying files around that are not conveniently located right in my home directory. So here I'm in the ADIR under the DevNet directory, but let's CD up one level. Let's go into DevNet and let's say pwd. You can see that we're in /home/Travis P. Bonfili /DevNet, right? Remember, the tilde represents that home directory /home/Travis P. Bonfili. If I say ls-l, you can see we've got some files in here. We've got other directories. So I'm going to cd into dir c, right? Now, what if I wanted to cd back into ADIR? How would you do that? Well, I could use the absolute path name by saying cd /home/Travis P. Bonfili /devnet/ADIR. And that's going to work. However, that is not too optimal, right? What I could have done is, and it's the same scenario here, I want to go back into dir c, and I'm in ADIR, right? So I could hit the up arrow and then come back here and say dir c, and yeah, that's going to work, right? That gets us here, but typically not how you do it. If I'm in dir c and I know that ADIR is in the same parent directory DevNet, what you could do is simply say cd ... move up one directory and then jump into ADIR. Now, you might argue that, hitting that up arrow there, you might be able to do that, but I'm not a fan of that. I'm a fan of going ahead and if you know where you're at in the file system. And so what if I wanted to go into dir a, cd space ... dir a. So go up one directory, then go down into dir a. So I'm in dir a. How do I get into dir b? Directory B. Well, go up one directory into DevNet and then go down into dir B, right? And that's how you can move around using the ... And again, this is sort of an unkind moving around in the file system where you're not in your home directory, like everything is not in that home directory, or you're not trying to get to things that are in your home directory. You're out there in the file system running around doing things, right? And so this is a great example of that. And the same is true if I am in dir b and we know we have a file. Let's use the ls command. What if I wanted to list out the contents of ADIR, lowercase a dir? Well, what if I say lowercase or ls, lowercase a dir, but I'm in dir b? Is that going to work? Does Linux know that I mean the ADIR that's up in the parent directory DevNet and then down in ADIR, and I want to see new file, or not new file, let's just see all, we want to see all of the files in ADIR. No, it's going to come back and tell me can't access ADIR, no such file or directory, because remember, by default, the ls command is looking at the current working directory, the present working directory. And again, present and print, I'm using those interchangeably for a mnemonic to help you remember pwd. What is my present working directory? I want to print my current working directory, right? Print working directory. Where am I? And so there we see we're in dir b. But in dir b, I list all the files out. You can see that we've got some files in here, but there is no directory, right? There is no ADIR file. And remember, directories are looked at by the Linux file system as files. So there is no ADIR file. So we get that error message telling us no such file or directory. So, but we know it's up in the parent directory. So what about an ls ... ADIR? And it works with the ls command. It works with the copy command that we've seen. It works with the rm command that we've seen. What if I wanted to remove new file, but I don't want to change my directory into ADIR? Well, I could simply say rm for remove the file. It's up one directory. It's up in the parent directory DevNet and then down in the ADIR directory, and the name of the file is new file. And then let's rerun that ls.dir command to see that it was removed, right? Because think of the other options to achieve what we just did, right? Think about that. If I wanted to list it out and I'm not using the ... how could I do that? Well, I could say ls tilde / devnet / adir, right? To list it out. That's a lot more. And again, there's no files in there. That's a lot more than saying ls.adir. Whoops, adir. And again, it's not that one is the right way and one is the wrong way. The purist is obviously going to tell you that the shorter you can make the command, the better, right? However, you're going to become familiar with one and comfortable with one way of doing things. And that's typically how you're going to end up doing it. Very rarely do I run into individuals who are using multiple variations of what we've looked at here in order to just sort of practice, right? You're typically looking for the optimal solution to solve your problem, whether it's removing a file, listing out the contents of a directory, or copying a file into another directory. And these little shortcuts, as I like to call them, are very, very handy. Because again, without that, you'd be stuck with this. And if you didn't understand the tilde, you'd be looking at doing something like this, Travis P. Bond Feely / devnet / adir, right? And that's a lot of typing when you could simply say ls ... /adir, because we're in dir B, right? And again, this is all predicated, all dependent upon where you sit currently in the file system. And always remember that if you need to get out of whatever directory, you're lost, you don't know where you're at or what happened, CD. And where am I at when I type CD with no arguments? I'm back in my home directory, and then I can start my journey through the Linux file system anew from a location that I'm familiar with. All right. Well, hopefully this has been an informative video about not just the pwd command for print the current working directory, or print your working directory, or the cd command to change directories. We talked about the Linux file system hierarchy, how it starts at the root directory. We talked about the difference between absolute path names and relative path names, and we really started to use the dot and the ... to represent or to shorten a lot of the commands that we would run when we're out there moving around in that Linux file system. All right, well, hopefully this has helped you guys out. It's given you a good idea and some good examples to think about, and maybe you'll come up with some of your own. And that is all I've got for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.